Money Show.
Personal Finance with Warren Ingram.
Well, I don't know if you're aware of this, but it's National Wills Week. It's a good time to talk about having a will, why you need to have one. It can be, if you just get it witnessed correctly, something you can do very, very quickly indeed. So please don't leave your family without a will. Warren Ingram, co-founder of Galileo Capital, joins us now. Warren, good evening.
Good evening, Stephen. I think it's almost should be criminal nowadays to be an adult and not have a will, and especially if you're a parent and you don't have a will. If you're listening to this, please go and get a will. It's almost the most important thing you can do for your family just after feeding them is get yourself a will.
Start at the beginning. Why is it so essential? And a lot of it is about really your own freedom, about distributing assets.
Yeah, I think so. Just to understand that, when you craft a will, a lot of people would say to me, "No, I don't need a will because I've got nothing." Well, that's not necessarily true. You will have some possessions. You might not be a multimillionaire with lots of assets, but if you've got any kind of possessions, and you want them to go to specific people, then you need to have a will, because if you're over 18 years old and you die without a will, then what happens is you leaving it to a government department and a government official in the master's office to decide how your assets are going to be distributed. And if that includes a car or a bed or some furniture or some jewelry or some clothes or whatever it is, you need to have a will to be able to decide how that stuff is going to be distributed and who you want to actually get it. And that's the first point here is it gives you control over what happens to your stuff, your assets, when you die. And if you don't have a will, then you're allowing someone else to make that decision on your part. So you need to take control of your money and get that freedom to decide what happens with your stuff. Equally, if it's if you are dying with real assets, then really you want to make sure that the loved ones in your life are taken care of, and so making sure that the right money goes to the right people. That the only way you can do that, the only way you can be absolutely sure that the right people get your money is if you have a will and it makes sure that it's a valid one on your death.
And then, it's the Interstate Succession Act. Those rules will set out, and you actually don't know, if you don't have a will, what will happen. But, the money could go to the wrong person. All sorts of things could happen.
Yeah, we don't want to do jargon on the show. So I think we have to just say, though, like there is this thing called the intestate succession. And what that does is that determines what happens to an adult person's stuff when they die and they don't have a will. If at the moment, if you don't have a will, there is a formula, and the master's office has to go and say, okay, if this person's died without a will but they own assets, then the first thing we need to do is we need to find out if the person who's died has a spouse or more, and then we give priority to spouses. Then we secondly give priority to beneficiaries. In most instances, that would be children, but equally it could be parents. If you're looking after your parents, then they need some money. And so you go on the list, and if you don't have blood relatives, then potentially it could be cousins, etc. So you can quickly see, Stephen, how this becomes a real mess for some government official who knows nothing about you, and you die, and now they've got to try and do right by your family or your loved ones, and they might not know all the stories and who should be getting money, who shouldn't be, and that's that's just the kickoff. From there it can get really complex and extremely messy.
The other thing, of course, is children. You really do need to designate who will be the guardian of your children.
Yeah, so I can't tell you how many times you see this. Parents, let's say people in their late 20s, early 30s have children, and they say, well, I'll just let my own parents, so effectively your children's grandparents look after my children if I and my wife die. Now, your parents might have been great parents to you, but there is an entire extra generation gap between, let's say, a 50-year-old or 55-year-old grandparent and a 6-year-old child. And I don't think anybody's getting a gift when grandparents become the parents of very young children, because those children need to be kind of sure of being looked after, into their late teens and potentially, into their early 20s if they're going to go to university. So, it's something that you really need to think about in a will, is to say, I need to nominate and write down who the person is going to be, or who's the couple, for example, that's going to look after my children. And I would suggest to adult parents that it maybe shouldn't be the grandparents. It should be your own siblings, if you've got, or another couple that know you and know how you would like to raise your children. And then you need to actually write their names down. And most importantly, you need to talk to everybody involved. Go and talk to your own parents and say to the grandparents, look, you're not going to be the guardians, because you might die, relatively young in the children's lives. So you are going to continue to be their grandparents, and we hope you're going to be there in their lives, but we're choosing someone else. And we need to make provision. So we need to actually financially look after our children, which means we need to potentially give some money in our will to the guardians, so that they have money to look after, extra children. And that could be really expensive. Or it might require them to get a bigger car. It might require them to get a bigger house. So there's lots to be discussed with everybody involved, but that stuff needs to be written in the will, and clearly kind of delineated who's going to look after everybody, and then how the assets get divided up.
Okay, so now you've decided to draw up a will. We've got until 8 o'clock to draw it up. What do we need to do? There are a couple of legal requirements. They're not too onerous, though.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it at the start. So you need to sign every single page of the will, and it needs to be witnessed. And they have this phrase, two competent individuals, and basically, to me, that means two adults who are capable of testifying that you did sign this, that this is your signature on every single page of the will. Most importantly, those witnesses cannot be people who are named in the will, because there's an obvious conflict of interest. If I'm going to inherit some money in a will and I'm the witness, then that could be challenged. So it has to be people that are completely uninvolved in getting anything from the will, but they are capable of testifying that yes, it was Warren who signed the will. And I suggest that there should be two copies. One that you keep, for example. If you are going to get a professional executor of your estate, and then I'll talk about an executor now, then they should have a copy, and then one you keep, and inform your loved ones where that will is, so that they can use that and then begin winding up your estate. So most importantly, make sure that you've written down in plain language what you want to happen with your estate, with your assets, and then what happens to your children, and then make sure that it's all written down. One of the things you must do is appoint a person called an executor, and the executor is the person that takes legal responsibility for you when you die. In other words, and I know we're using lots of jargon now, but when you die, what happens is all of your assets go into a thing called an estate late. They even create an estate late bank account. And so your executor, let's just say it's me, and I've died, effectively my executor will become the person that looks after Warren Ingram's estate late, and they make the decisions based on the will for where my money goes, how things should be wound up, what should be sold, and so you can in your will, and you should in your will, appoint the executor. A lot of the time people will say, I'm going to appoint a family member to be the executor. Now, that's fine if your family member is someone that's very competent with admin and is willing to go through probably 2 years of, it's probably an exaggeration to say administrative hell, but it's not a big exaggeration, because you are dealing with government departments, banks, insurance companies, all those things to wind up an estate. My suggestion is, very often, if you are going to appoint a family member, allow them the option of appointing an agent, a legal person who can then actually go through all the work on your behalf. So either you appoint a lawyer or a family member to become the executor in your estate. Those are probably the most important things that you want to have in your will.
And what happens if you don't have an executor? I mean, what happens then?
Yeah, then you've just created a mess. So, what then happens is a government official needs to, and it's in the master's office, the master of the High Court, then will appoint an executor on your behalf. And just understand that it's incredibly difficult to fire an executor. So now they're going to appoint somebody else on your behalf, and then you hope that they're going to do a good job in winding up your estate. And as I said at the start, it could take 2 years to wind up a well-run, well-managed estate with a good will. Can you imagine how many years it's going to take to wind up an estate when you've now got someone else that the government's appointed on your behalf to wind up your estate? So, I just think you absolutely should have an executor.
I think a lot of us see a will as something you do once. Obviously, you do need to update it from time to time. You need to look at it quite regularly.
Yeah, I think when life changes, so for example, when you get married, when you get divorced, when you have one child, update your will, but definitely when you have another child, you'll need to update your will as well. Or if you have big things going on in your life, you've started a new business or you've sold a business, very dramatic changes or very significant changes in life require you to change your will. Equally, for example, let's say you have, there are always tough stories in life. So you might have adult children where one of your adult children becomes incompetent. For example, they have an accident and they're alive, but they can't make sound financial decisions. So you might need to change your will to accommodate them, or one of your children unfortunately develops a drug habit or something like that, where you definitely don't want them to inherit a whole lot of money. So you might then in your will say, half of my estate will go to my one child, the other half of my estate will go to a new trust that will be formed to look after my child who's either incompetent, mentally incapable, or a drug addict, and they can't be given lump sums, but we should provide for them on a monthly basis. So there are things you can do in a will that will protect the people, and you can't do that once off and hope it's all going to be done. You will have to continuously make sure that it's updated as your life or your loved ones' lives change.
Your questions for Warren Ingram tonight. We're talking about wills specifically, but other questions too, of course, personal finance. 011-883-0702, 0214460567. We do have one question that came in from Tsepo, who's saying, Warren, I'm looking at buying a property for my family. I'd like to know if it's wise to take a 30-year home loan, and we are seeing sort of more 30-year home loans in the market. This will help me get the house that we like. I plan to use my bonuses to pay it off faster. Is this a good idea? That and your questions for Warren in just a moment.
The Money Show. Personal finance with Warren Ingram.
Well, plenty of calls coming in for you, Warren. Let's start with Jane in Lenasia. Jane, hi. You're on the line with Warren Ingram. You've got a question about wills.
Good evening, Stephen and Warren. Great show as usual. Yes, please. I just need to know, how long does it take to wind up a will? Because I haven't got my share and it's almost 14 years.
Wow.
And I'm a bit concerned because my brother, he used to help me financially, and his wife knew about that. But it seems like she's taken the will, but we haven't received our share.
Sure.
So I'd just like to know, what can we do? Thank you.
All right, Jane, that's a tricky one. Warren, 14 years surely is longer than usual.
That's an understatement of note, Stephen, and I'm not laughing at the situation, Jane. That's hectic. So a normal will where if you're it's called an estate. So when someone dies, it becomes an estate, and it normally takes about 2 years to wind up a fairly simple, well-ordered estate. Where it gets messy will be, for example, when someone's got investments in different private businesses and people don't necessarily know where they all are, or they own a lot of properties which are forced to be sold because that's what's stipulated in the will. Then you might find it could take a couple of years, and I've often heard of estates taking up to 4 or 5 years to be wound up when they are complex and messy. I can honestly say I've never heard of an estate taking 14 years to wind up. There must be there must be a lot more to that story than that. So I think it's definitely worth investigating. And my view is that it's probably time to go to the master and ask them what's happening with that. Wherever your brother died, find out what that master's office is and go and lodge an inquiry there, because that doesn't sound right to me at all.
There are problems in the master's offices as well, which can make it more complicated. So good luck, Jane. Christine and Centurion, hi. Good question about executors.
Yes,
I don't want to say the word.
What pointers can you give us when choosing an executor? What must we look out for? What pointers can you give us in choosing an executor? I'm at this point now, and I don't know who to choose. Who do we go to? What do we do?
I mean, my own preference is always to choose, a person that's got a lot of experience in winding up estates. So lots of professionals that do it. Most of the time, there will be either lawyers or law firms or accountants that specialize in this area. And that always is my preference, just because they've got experience. They usually have very good kind of connections, and I'm not saying illegal ones, but very good connections in the master's office. They know who to go and speak to kind of move things along and find out why things are being held up. But if you don't want to appoint a professional immediately, then appoint a family member that understands a lot more about the law and about finances, if that's possible, and then allow them to go and appoint a legal firm as agents of the executor to go and wind up the estate on their behalf as the executor. But generally, that would be my view. Is I certainly wouldn't gift. I don't think it's a favor that you're doing if you give it to a family member and ask them to wind up the estate. So in my own life, I've made sure I've appointed a professional.
Thank you.
All right, Christine, thank you. Alias and Brackpan. Alias, is that really your name? What's your question?
May a beneficiary be an executor as well?
They can be. So if for example you've got an adult child that's that you want them to be the executor of your estate, that's absolutely fine. They will. I mean, there is obviously the potential for some real disputes. If the rest of the beneficiaries are not happy with how things get wound up, but it is quite common for older parents to appoint one of their adult children to be the executor.
All right, Alias and Brackpan, thank you. Daniel's got in touch with the questions, quite technical, so I warn you, Warren. If you're a beneficiary from an overseas life insurance policy when a person dies, so let's say someone is, let's say someone's in Russia, in the UK, and they pass away there, and you receive the life insurance as a result, do you pay a tax on the benefit in South Africa?
The short answer, Stephen, I haven't got a clue. I'm sure there is now we're into the tricky area of taxes, and I'm not sure actually, to be very honest. I would guess, and it is a real guess, so you are going to have to find out. But I would guess that you won't pay tax here because it's not an income that you're earning. It's the payout of a life policy. But please check that one. I wouldn't want to bet my future on that one.
No, sure. It's, as I say, very complicated. We do need to answer Tsepo's question. Tsepo asked, I'm looking at buying a property for my family. Is it wise to take a 30-year home loan? And we see more and more sort of 30-year loans rather than 20-year loans, which is where these started.
Joe, I'm so uncomfortable with people increasing the time frame on debt. So we're seeing it. You're right, Stephen. We're seeing it on houses. We're seeing it on cars. And just to understand that, yes, it makes it more affordable on a monthly basis. So what's happening is, instead of paying 10,000 Rand a month on your mortgage, you're now paying 9,000 Rand a month. And that feels better for you because you can now afford the house. But actually what you're doing is you're increasing the amount that you're going to have to pay, probably by an extra 30 or 50%. So, if you were spending 10 million Rand on a house, I've got to make the math simple for myself. That means that actually you might end up spending 20 or 25 million over the life of a 30-year mortgage to actually pay it back, because you're paying the capital plus all that interest. So if you are going to take a 30-year mortgage, and generally that's mainly for first-time buyers, that's what the banks would offer to, then make sure that you don't take 30 years to pay it off. You pay it off as fast as you can with, I see Tsepo says, he'll use bonuses to do that. And I think that's good. good, but you try and pay off extra money every single month, and every single time you get extra bit of money, and get it done in the 20-year period, and if possible, get it done even quicker than that.
Warren Ingram, thank you very much indeed, co-founder of Galileo Capital with Personal Finance tonight. And thanks very much indeed for your questions for Warren.